good morning. Welcome to the very last day of Vancouver Startup Week. Thank you for joining us. My name is Vivian and I am on the Vancouver Startup Week team. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are grateful to be virtually gathered on Indigenous land, regardless of where you are joining us from. I'm grateful to be on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. I am privileged to live, work, and play on these lands. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this morning for Vancouver Startup Week 2021, and welcome to What Makes a Good Startup Founder. This session is hosted and supported by Innovate BC. Innovate BC is a Crown agency that provides small businesses around our province with funding, business coaching, and educational content. They are helping entrepreneurs and founders start and scale their businesses and adapt to all the changes that are brought on by COVID-19. If you are looking for support for your business, make sure you stop by the Innovate BC booth to learn more about how they can help. And of course, I'm sure this panel will help with that as well. I also do want to thank Raghwa and the Innovate BC team for being a sponsor of Vancouver Startup Week. We could not throw this event without the continuous support from all of our community partners like Innovate BC. So thank you for all of that. Before I hand over the mic, I do want to remind everyone that if you're tuning in and you do have any questions for our speakers, you can post them on the Q&A in the Whova session, where you can also upvote questions if there's something you see that you like. I'll now pass the mic over to Raghwa, CEO of Innovate BC, and I'll let you begin the session.
Thank you, Vivian, and good morning to everybody. Welcome to the last day of Vancouver Startup Week. I think we've kept the best for the last. We're hoping. So as Vivian mentioned, I'm Raghwa Gopal, President and CEO of Innovate BC, which is a Crown agency of the province that provides small businesses around the province with funding, resources, and support. It's a pleasure for me to join you all today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Okanagan Silex people. And I wanted to also mention that we have Innovate BC has the pleasure of operating our office from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Innovate BC is actually very thrilled to be partnering with Vancouver Startup Week for its 8th consecutive year. We represent the government of British Columbia and the people who make up our innovation ecosystem in the province, and Innovate BC couldn't be prouder to be part of this event. This morning, we've assembled a group of successful BC founders for a discussion on what makes a good startup founder. These experts will be sharing the lessons they learned, pitfalls to avoid, and will answer your burning questions about starting and growing a company in British Columbia. To ask a question, type it in and we'll address as many as we can in the last 10 to 15 minutes of this hour. With that said, let me introduce very briefly the panelists to you, and I'm going to ask the panelists to do a brief introduction after this as well. So first one, Enno Tamm is the co-founder and CEO of ThisFish. ThisFish is a leader in seafood traceability and production software. They are improving the social, environmental, and financial sustainability of the seafood industry. And it was my pleasure earlier this month to award a prize of $150,000 on the first ever BC Aquaculture Innovation Award that ThisFish won. So congratulations again, Eric.
Thank you.
Humaira Ahmed, founder and CEO of Locelle. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Locelle is a platform created to advance women in the workplace through tailored one-on-one mentor matching, live leadership sessions, and networking with peers with similar interests and goals. They successfully took part in one of our business coaching programs through our partners in Victoria with Viatech, I believe. So welcome.
Thank you.
Lynda Brown-Ganzert, founder and CEO of Curatio. Lynda is in Kelowna, just like me this morning. Curatio is a platform that helps match patients with other patients who understand what they're going through. The technology is helping everyone get the support, information, and tools they need to achieve their best health outcomes. They also took part in one of our business coaching programs through one of our Vancouver partners. So welcome on board. Michael Cheng, co-founder and CEO of Lumen 5. Good morning, Michael.
Morning.
Lumen 5 is a video creation software that helps marketers, publishers, and brands create video content easily without any technical expertise. And again, I was very privileged last year to hand you a prize as well. You took the first place prize of $105,000 in 2019 New Ventures BC competition. That was sponsored by Innovate BC, and I think I handed you the check that year as well. So
I have many photos with you.
Exactly. So I welcome the panelists, and what I'll do is maybe starting with Eric, just if you want to do a quick introduction of yourself, anything that I have missed that you want to share, maybe why you're here and why you're doing this.
Yeah, great. So, yeah, no surprise that I'm running a software company in the seafood industry, and I actually grew up in the commercial fishing industry in British Columbia, having been born in Tofino and raised in Euclid on the west coast of Vancouver Island. I was actually working for an environmental group, EcoTrust Canada, when we started to do work on seafood traceability and helping the industry create more sustainable and traceable products. From that work inside EcoTrust, actually, I'm a co-founder of the company along with EcoTrust, and we spun it out into a for-profit company in 2018. Some of the technology that we incubated inside the nonprofit was getting a lot of commercial traction, and we decided to spin it out into a for-profit, raise some angel investor, and now we're sort of on your typical startup path. So maybe the origins or the genesis is a little different than most companies coming out of an environmental group, but we're sort of now on that kind of standard startup trajectory.
Excellent. Humaira, I'm going to go to you next.
Thank you so much, Raghwa, and everybody else. I'm Humaira Ahmed, founder and CEO of It's actually Locelle. I know
Locelle, sorry.
It's challenging because it's Locelle in French.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually was born and raised in Pakistan. Karachi was the city I grew up in, and my family moved to Canada in 2005. And also another thing that, and you'll understand where I'm getting with this, but one of the things that really made me start the company that I did was because I come from software engineering background, and I found, especially in Pakistan, that in Canada, I was enrolled in New York University, third year, and oh my God, I was either one of the only ones or one of the few in our programs at York University. So there's a lot of, women, are not advancing fast enough, and actually numbers are getting lower and lower. And I'm here to change that. I think also coming from an immigrant kind of background, I see a lot of challenges in the workplace, and we're here to solve it.
Excellent. And my apologies, Locale, not Locelle.
That's
sorry.
okay. Not the first.
Lynda.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. So I am founder and CEO of Curatio, which is the world's first social health prescription. And what does that mean? Our mission statement is no patient alone. And, just like they tell writers to write about what you know, I think that falls in place with entrepreneurs to innovate what you know. And so my background's in digital media. I've spent my entire career working across pretty much every platform, from video games, telecommunications. But it wasn't until I became a patient and I went through some health challenges of my own that I recognized this need to privately connect patients that are going through the same thing, provide curated evidence-based information programs, coaching, daily tracking tools that would ultimately improve quality of life and their health outcomes. So here we are today. We're used in 104 countries. We're in 20 languages. We are headquartered in Vancouver, where we have a team that works around the world. And I'm happy to be here today with founders that I admire. And of course, Raghwa, who I'm a big fan of. So thank you.
Thanks, Lynda. That's great. Michael, I'm going to go to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I went through school studying new media, and many of the courses I took had a video editing component. And I always remembered video editing was so difficult. Not only, you pick up something like Adobe After Effects, you use it on a school computer, you try to practice at home, but then the software licensing cost, it's a very complicated world to create a video. And then over time, after school, I started to notice that well, there's more video than ever before. You go on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, everything is video. Who's making all these videos if it's still so difficult? And then I realized that while the demand for video has skyrocketed over the past 10 years, the supply of video has kind of relatively remained the same. Companies hire agencies, they hire professionals and contractors, and videos cost thousands of dollars. But now you post something on Instagram story and it disappears after 24 hours. So you can't really justify the same kind of cost as you used to. So we set out on a very similar vision as something that I imagine PowerPoint did back in the day. How do you help people create presentations? How do you make it so approachable and easy that even grade school student can do it? And that's the operating philosophy. That's the product philosophy still. And when you sign up for an account on Lumen 5 and create a video, it'll feel very much like PowerPoint. And that's what I really love doing, is just using technology to create simple experiences that enable people to accomplish things that they couldn't before. And the reason why I'm here today is, like many of the other panelists, probably I wish that somebody answered my questions when I first started my journey. Hopefully I can help in kind of the next generation of aspiring entrepreneurs.
And that's why I'm so excited to be here sharing the stage with these amazing founders, people that I really admire. And I follow all of you, by the way. So just want to see how your journey progresses. And I'm a huge supporter of all of you. With that said, I want to welcome all of the viewers that that have joined in to listen. And I myself am looking forward to learning a few things from you all as well. And I'm hoping all our viewers will walk away today with some really good insight and feedback that will help them as well. So with that, I'm just gonna get into the discussion right now. I have a few questions. That all of you are welcome to chip in and give your thoughts and any advice or words of wisdom that you have. But maybe I'll start the first question with Eric, since he's already kind of alluded to how he started his company. So the question the first question is, why did you start your company, and what was the compelling need that made you take this risk, which every startup is a risk, no matter what it is?
Yeah, I mean, well, for me, having been born and raised in the commercial seafood industry, and also seeing how badly the industry's reputation has suffered because of issues around illegal fish, seafood mislabeling, more recently even exposés about slavery and supply chains. So, I felt compelled to help improve the industry that my family's been a part of for numerous generations. The one thing that I think is interesting, one year I captained my dad's commercial fishing vessel, and being a startup co-founder is very much like running a commercial fishing vessel, because when you're running a commercial fishing vessel, you need to be a navigator, you need to be a diesel engineer, you need to be a cook, and you also need to be a fisherman. So you have to have your kind of fingers in a lot of pots. And I think being a startup founder is very much like my experience captaining a fish boat for a year.
All right, that sounds interesting. Anybody else that want to jump in?
Well, maybe relevant for this audience is, before I started Curatio and had this sort of personal calling to our mission, I had been deep into the area of sort of quantified self and private social networks, and had a previous startup in that area. But I think what I'd love to share with the audience is this notion of an MVP in lean startup. So, I had the idea and had some traction on the idea. Quickly found a wonderful technical co-founder, Alarisa Davuti. And what we did, which is really, in retrospect, was super bold, is we found this global challenge that was a perfect use case. So it was a global challenge around a rare condition in patient population. And it provided us with all of the sort of the customer insights, the user needs, the requirements. And so we took it just as a lean startup exercise and said, this is a perfect use case. Let's iterate on this. And let's do it within the rigors of this global challenge. Well, much to our surprise, we made it through to the second stage against these, companies whose names you would all know, and we were shocked. And so we had to build a prototype in 40 days with
no resources, basically some code that I had previously. And we begged, borrowed, and stole, you know, whoever we could find. And we built this prototype in 40 days, and we went on to win the challenge. So, you know, I think I guess the lesson of that story is that, you know, this notion of an MVP and really getting clear on what the customer need is will serve you very well. And the discipline around doing that up front pays dividends as you go forward.
Can I just add a little, for us, it's really why we're doing this is to, I mean, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg's words, you know, women belong in places where decisions are made. And I think about this so much. I have 2 daughters, they're 5 and 7 now. And just even looking around, it's just so hard to be able to see those role models. We want to be part of that solution. And I think this problem, you know, when we started Locelle about, you know, 3 years ago, not many people were really, you know, listening that this was a problem. And I think now, you know, moving on with the times and trends, I think timing has been perfect. I mean, after finally 3 years, we're profitable, bootstrapped. So it's possible, right? I think it's just being able to be focused on your mission, knowing your market better than everybody else around you. If you don't know the answer, find the answer. But yeah, we work with some of the best tech companies in Canada, mostly in British Columbia, and we're working on building a diverse leadership pipeline. So it's super close to me, home. You know, I didn't grow up with role models in Pakistan. Everybody was a stay-at-home mom. But here, I want to change that. So purpose and passion is really key to what we're doing.
Excellent.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think the idea that you work on really has to be compelling, because it has to be compelling enough to compel you to work on it for a long period of time. It's not really a quick overnight success that anyone can really expect. And so if something's going to capture your attention for 4, 7, 10 plus years, and then not only does it have to be compelling enough to capture your own attention, somehow capture the attention of 20, 30, 50, and then as you grow the team, 100 plus people, that's so important. And for us at Lumen 5, really our view is that communication evolves all the time. And our job is to help businesses and people and professionals evolve their communication skills. And where video once was this kind of plaything and it's this entertaining thing, and people were toying around with, well, what do internet videos look like? And there were mostly cat videos in the early days. Nowadays, video is how we communicate. It's how we learn. Think of the implications that compelling video content has for better or for worse. You look at things like misinformation and fake news, and that gets shared because there are great content creators in the world of misinformation and fake news. And I found our work to be very meaningful, especially over the past year, being able to work with health organizations around the world, creating coronavirus Mythbuster video series, and really empowering health professionals to create videos because they know the stuff the best. And many of these organizations don't have resources to go hire professional video editors or go out there and hire agencies. And then likewise, working with vaccine manufacturers as well to pump out a lot of this information about vaccination, about the virus. And that's the type of work that I find really meaningful. And I think, you know, from a business perspective, yes, a lot of our videos are used for promotional purposes and marketing use cases, but at its core, what we're trying to accomplish is to advance communication. So I think compelling ideas are important, and they tend to span almost decades, this decade-long mission. And so that's what I see Lumen 5 as well.
Great stories. I think what I'm hearing is, you know, your personal and life experiences, you know, you're able to see some gaps, and then you decide, well, I'm going to go innovate. I'm going to create those solutions, which is fantastic. So I think for people that are kind of listening, I'm pretty sure in all our lives, on a daily basis, we're seeing, you know, some deficiencies or gaps that we can all be looking at. How do we solve that problem, which kind of gets into innovation or a startup. So great stories. Thank you for that. As you all have been through the startup phase, and all successful startups anyway have to be very nimble on a daily basis, actually, not even sometimes on an hourly basis. So Humaira, I'm going to start with you with this question is, how do you scale the velocity and nimbleness that you have a startup? Like, how do you kind of scale that up?
Yeah, I was really thinking about this question, Raghwa, because when you say how do you scale, like it took us, quite a while, and maybe in the startup world, it's not so bad. What felt like 30 years, there's definitely being bootstrapped. There's been challenges, but I think it's also worked in our advantage, to our advantage. So I wanted to share. I actually put together some notes so I didn't miss some of the key points. Wanted to share some of those. So one is because we're bootstrapped, took some personal loans, took a BDC loan, got some IRAP funding. We really wanted to make sure that we were able to get customers. We were able to grow through customer revenues. And that really allowed us to get that payment up front. I mean, even today, like we can't announce it yet, but we're really working with some of the best companies around the world. If they come to us, we're able to get that money higher. And we have a process that's repeatable, scalable, and really be able to grow. So I think just being able to grow through customer revenues, I would say sell before you build, if you can. That's worked really well for us. Another thing that I believe that's really worked for us is not being afraid to fail. I think for the first 2 years of Locelle, I was so afraid to fail, be rejected, and I was afraid to ask. And now, even if it's a no from a customer, I would rather get it sooner than later. And I'm not afraid. Like sometimes just like, okay, today I'm going to get 10 no's. And that's kind of, and not a great mindset, might not work for you, but like for me, that totally works, because if I go with 10 no's and I get like 3 yeses, oh my gosh, like that just totally makes my day. So please do not be afraid to fail. Another thing that I would say is knowing your key strengths and playing to that really adds. Like I'm a generalist, like I can do a lot of things. And previously when I used to work at other companies, it was really hard because people want you to be specialists. But if you're a generalist, that can work really well. But knowing where your strengths are and hiring for other complementary skill sets that are better than you. I actually love it when my team, comes up with an idea and says, actually, Humaira, I think we should do it this way. And I go, you know what? Yes, I'll take some time, but you're right, let's do it. So I think just even hiring people who are better than you. So that's it. And the last point that I think it's super, super important is to surround ourselves with CEOs who've been there or who are just a little ahead of you, because that's changed a lot for us. Like up until last year, we had no money in the bank. And it was, nobody obviously was going to give us money, but we were able to pivot, from networking to mentor matching, for those of you who followed our journey. And that was, just being able to then connect with people. And now that we're in like growth and scale up phase, it's being able to then connect with people like that who have done it. Huge, because you can learn from their mistakes and their journeys and lessons. I would say, please, like as you transition into different phases of your startup, look for people who have been there.
Yeah, those experiences are so great. It can really shortcut your growth and also save your company in many times by leveraging on somebody else's experience. So great ideas. This is fantastic. Anybody else that wants to jump in on that?
I think I'd just add to that. I agree with what you've been saying, Humaira, and I would maybe touch a little bit on culture and rhythm. And there's a saying that culture will eat strategy any day of the week, and I think that's true in terms of being nimble and scalability. Is you have to create a type of rhythm or a cadence with your team, and especially when you're working in this way, sort of remotely and around the world. Shannon Cisco Byrne, who's right in our backyard, has written a couple of books on this, Metronome Effect as one, and one that was really fundamental to helping me structure a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly rhythm for our team as we grew. And I mean, we've tripled in size since last year. And in some ways, it's that rhythm that has kept us connected, kept us together, and enabled us to move quickly. So I would say that investment that you put in place with developing the rhythm for your team, the culture, the communication pathways is really important, because it's communication's the first thing to break down as you scale. It's really painful. And I won't say that we've got it perfect, but it's when you've got at least that rhythm in place, when you've got that discipline in place, you can stay connected and stay nimble. So investments in that area up front, I think, are really, really beneficial.
Great point, Lynda. I mean, a lot of one of the biggest mistakes people do is they say, well, we'll do some of these later. And as you're growing, like you said, communication breaks down. So if you start thinking of that right from the get-go, and always keep that in mind, it'd be hugely beneficial rather than saying, well, I'll do it a little later, and it becomes too late. Once you grow from 10 to 20 people, it's a different kind of challenges. So it needs to be built in as you're growing. Fantastic. Anybody else has any they want to say, add anything to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Well, I was just going to double down on Metronome because we went through the Metronome strategic planning process back in November. We were 7 staff, and now we're at 14. So I saw it coming. Like I saw that, in a very small organization, you can maybe have a little bit of command and control, but if you want to scale that, you can't scale command and control and think you're going to have a nimble, engaged company. You have to build it into your culture and have it from bottom up and get into, as Lynda said, a kind of a rhythm. So yeah, the Metronome has been great for our company as well.
That's very interesting. I'll have to look into it. I haven't heard of that one before. I was just going to say on the topic of culture, as founders in the early stages, we tend to learn a ton in the first 6-12 months as we're ourselves, maybe with a few partners trying to find product market fit. And within that hyper dense journey, we learn to take no's, we learn to be imperfect, we learn MVP and speed and acceleration and the value that execution has over perfectionism and strategic planning. And I find that a lot of scaling that nimbleness is, can you give that experience and those learnings to the next generation of your hiring, and then can that group learn that quick enough to educate the next generation? And there's really no other way. And a simple way of looking at culture building is it's always a combination of what you tolerate and what you celebrate. And so if you celebrate imperfection from early on, and when someone accidentally sends an email that they didn't intend to, or loses a deal, and you celebrate the attempts and celebrate those failures, that tends to create a culture that embraces that mindset. And then you mentioned earlier that many people think it's something you do later, but really there's so much momentum in culture that once momentum has been established, it is so much more work to counteract that and undo something. And I think one of the common misconceptions is, hiring for culture fits, because that almost assumes that you have a stable culture and an individual has a stable culture and they either fit or they don't. But many times I've seen inconsistencies in any single individual, because people do change their behaviors based on the culture they're in. You put someone in a completely different environment, you surround them with people who value different things, they behave very differently. So it is two parts of the equation. And again, it goes back to what you celebrate and what you tolerate.
Excellent. I just want to go back to a couple of things that Humaira mentioned. One was build before you build. What an amazing concept. I'm talking to a lot of startups, and it's the concept that not too many people are buying into. One of my very first startups, 1979, so about 40 some plus years ago, that's how I built my company. And not because that was my strategy when I was brilliant or anything like that. There was no outside capital. The only way to grow was to, build first and then tell them that it's coming. And then you build quickly and you deliver. And that's how I grew. So I think it's a great concept. And I think more startups should be utilizing that. And on the hiring, I totally agree with you, Humaira. I always wanted to hire people that were smarter than me. I always want to be the lowest on the totem pole in every room that I am. Even here, I want to be I'm so glad to be surrounded by all of you. So that's a great thing. And one more thing on hiring is I learned a long time ago, only because building a tech company in Kelowna, and you're the only company, it was very difficult to get people. So we didn't go out and start to advertise when I needed somebody. I had advertisement all year round, because you never know when a good person would be available, and you try and hire and make room for some really good, amazing people. So it's something to keep in mind. Great advice. I'm very excited. I'm going to go to the next question, which is every startup goes through this, and I spend a lot of time in trying to find that product market fit. And once you get there, I guess my question is, what changes from there to commercialization or scaling up in terms of internal policies, culture, biggest challenges and stuff. Lynda, you talked about some culture stuff. Maybe I'll get you to start on this one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm teaching this course right now called Finding Product Market Fit. So it's very relevant in digital media. And the thing is, it's not, as we all know, right? It's not a straight line. Like it's such a, it's such a whirl, and then you do find it, and then sometimes something will shift. And so then you need to kind of go find and pivot again. So in terms of, scaling up with that is, I think, when you've, the interesting thing is you go from this sort of scrappy bootstrapping, eating what you kill until you find that product market fit. And then you need to move into what I call the cookie factory, which is, okay, we've got it now. Now, how do we mechanize this? How do we repeat it? What are the processes that we go through, all the way from how do we, get the eggs and flour for the dough to, packaging and selling the product. And it's a very different mindset for the entrepreneur, for the CEO, right? Because you've been so scrappy and just trying to bring whatever resources you can to find that product market fit. And once you found it, you have to completely switch and go, okay, so how do I replicate this? How quickly can I scale it? What are my quality checks in there? What's, back to culture, how do I embed that still scrappy startup, but in a way that is much more polished, much more sustainable, repeatable. So there's a whole set of other processes that you need in place, and customer success. And you talked about excellence as well, Raghwa. So, it's a really big mindset, and that's where I think that those next set of hires, which maybe weren't part of the founding team, but have people that have expertise in doing this or have done it before, is really key, because you've got to build in that sort of repeatability and scalability. And then, always keep your eye on, our regulatory things changing, right? Is the market changing? Is there a competitor in place? Is there another opportunity that's ripe for the picking? And do we have the resources to capture that one as well? And you're pivoting all along, right? It's I would imagine it's much like being on a fishing vessel, right? Like the tide and the waves are always pushing you along, so you're always course correcting every single day, sometimes every hour. You're always just making sure you're on track there. Yeah, so it's a big mind shift. It is, from bootstrapping to a full-fledged, early stage, repeatable, scalable business, and how you measure that, putting your measurements up front, and your KPIs, and what does success look like, and measuring against that is key.
I think you hit on something there. I think the KPIs, I think the sooner you start to formulate what the real KPI should be that's meaningful, I think is pretty important. So thanks for that. Anybody else wants to add anything to that?
Yeah, just I'm adding on to what Lynda said. I mean, we're pretty fresh coming out of the product market fit and getting into, really growth phase of our company. I can totally, one thing, that misconception that I had about product market fit, we had built a networking app, and we have over 2,000 women working the tech industry on the app. For a lot of people, would be like, oh, how did you get to 100 users? Like there's a lot of articles, right? 100 users and 1,000, and then how do you scale that? And for this longest time, we also had one Fortune 500 client. And so we're like, okay, we have some revenues, we have all these users, how do we continue to scale that? And little did I know, wow, so far from actual product market fit. So product market fit, I used to think was when you have users or when you have your first customers. No, you don't. Until you have people who love what your solution offers, who love to also pay for it. I mean, we've changed our pricing like crazy, like by 1,000% since last year. They're still paying for it. And then the fact that they use it and love it so much that they talk about it, that's product market fit, and people love it, use it, talk about it. And I haven't had to do a single sales call since January of this year. And I was like, what is going on? And so I think just even learning in the process of what product market fit truly is, when you have that, and then the ability to optimize and iterate the process. So Lynda, absolutely, it's constant iteration. Whether that's learning from feedback, whether it's learning from things will break. We got to a point where things were great, and then things started to break. And then that's when you really have to not just think about scalability, but also sustainability. Like, can you sustain? And then you get for another roller coaster ride. And then, you know, and just being mindful of that, I think has really, really helped us. But because we're a small team of 7, I also do want to celebrate that we're all women, whether that's engineering, anything. So we're all, you know, women, and that'll change at some point. I'm not going to complain about that, but I think just being able to be a small team, everybody gets involved if there's a problem, and be able to, again, optimize and iterate the process, the product super quickly. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to share.
Yeah, great. Excellent feedback. This is fantastic. Love it. We talked a lot about culture in the last couple questions, and somebody told me that you hire somebody that doesn't fit into the culture, and it could be a huge problem, like very problematic. So, and then the other thing that I hear, and it's very true, is that you know, having a diverse and inclusive team, you know, you're much more innovative and productive, all of that. So my question is, how do you hire for culture fit? Like, what are the processes? What do you think about that will help some of the other founders right now? And how do you develop, you know, inclusive and diverse team? Maybe Michael, I'll start from you, but I'm pretty sure everybody else has some good ideas on this.
Yeah, it's certainly something that has crossed my mind a lot. How do you build a culture that's diverse yet somehow the same? And I remember in my hunt for an answer in that question, someone gave me a really good analogy, which is that's what marriage is. You know, marriage is a union between 2 very different people, but tied together oftentimes by a set of core values, a way they see the world, a perspective, which is not the same as having the same characteristics or surface level characteristics. And I think that's what it is. And when you go around reading core values on websites and about pages and career pages, they tend to be deep, fundamental things that transcends race, gender, you know, personalities, and so forth. So you never, I mean, hopefully you never find really surface level traits as company core values. But some of those things are like humility. You know, humility humility extends beyond cultures and personalities, and you can be a very different person and still be humble. You can be an extrovert, you can be an introvert, you can be opinionated, you can be passive. All of those things can still tie back to humility. So I think it's about finding those set of core values. And then the point I'll also make there is core values of a company isn't really something that you get to choose. It does start with the founder's DNA. And a lot of the times in coming up with the first set of core values or an understanding of it, it is really looking inwards. If you're a solo founder, really understanding what your own core values are. If you are with several co-founders, it's about finding what your collective core values are. I think where companies tend to fall into a trap is they will come up with aspirational core values, maybe modeled after a different company that has nothing to do with their internal DNA. And when the founders don't live up to the aspirational culture, and without the role models and the example, the organization can never live up to the aspirational culture. So it's always more practical to start with your own beliefs and your own core values. Another point I'll make there is one of the key lessons I've learned along the way is there's no such thing as a bad core value. There's no such thing as a bad culture. It's mostly just alignments. You can, whatever you can name has a double-edged sword to it. So humility could come across as a lack of confidence, maybe inaction. And so there's even the best sounding kindness, for example, might create a culture that is anti-conflict, which doesn't create the best ideas. So they're always double-edged sword, but alignment is what really drives the company forward. And the analogy I like to think about is if you're in the middle of an ocean, you can row in any direction and you'll reach land. But the only way you don't reach land is when everyone's rowing in different directions and you're kind of spinning in the middle. So those are some of the thoughts that I have on culture.
Great stuff. Anybody else wants to jump in? I think Lynda wants to. Go ahead, Lynda.
I'm going to do a shout out to another BC company here. So Talent Click does these wonderful assessments that give both you as the potential employer and the candidate an analysis of strengths and traits. And what I love about their tool is it's not good or bad, it's just on a spectrum. And so you can measure it against your core values, you know, to Michael's point. You can also look at it in terms of the role and what you're asking that person to do, and whether hiring tool that is a part of every single hire we do now. It doesn't matter if it's a summer intern to a C-level position. So Talent Click has been really, really helpful to us in finding that that fit when we're hiring. We also, check for alignment around our 4 core values. We also, because we've been working in a virtual way for the last 5 years, really we need to make sure that we've got the right fit for that type of environment. So if someone's extremely extroverted, we know we have to put in extra resources and support in a virtual environment for them to thrive. So there's, again, it goes back to what's the culture you're creating? What are those core values? And then there are tools there that make it easier, right? There are tools that make it easier for you to align and hire in that regard. And then certainly we've really improved our onboarding. So what does that first 5 days look like? What does that first 30 days look like? Who's the individual's buddy? How do we make sure there's virtual coffees all set up? And we've really taken a lot of care around onboarding because that's key. That first experience is really going to set the tone as well.
Anybody else?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I would say that it's also important to sort of check personal biases, because often that will create a very kind of homogenous culture in an organization. I know of one co-founder, CTO, that told me, they ran their engineer candidates through a very technical test to make sure they had the technical requirements. Then the other requirement was, would I want to go for a beer with that person? Now, of course, a lot of people don't drink beer, and that has, you'll only find a certain type of engineer who's probably male and, and probably, Caucasian, who's a big, heavy beer drinker. So, when you're setting up your hiring process, you have to really kind of check your biases and really look for building a diverse team. And the core values will help to set some parameters, because obviously, you don't want to have people in the company that, might bring a diverse perspective, but not really contribute to your core values. So I think that that's something that, we've worked pretty hard on. We have 14 people in our company, and 12 of us were born in different countries. Part of that is because of the great Canadian immigration system. This month I just hired a Chilean immigrant. He's only been here for 5 months with his young family. And, so we're very fortunate that we can build I think we in Canada can build very culturally diverse teams because of our immigration system. Where we're having a challenge actually is hiring women engineers and women technical leads. And so the other thing that one of my diversity coaches told me is, don't just look at your actual employees, look at your whole ecosystem around your company. So what I did is I went out and I actually recruited 2 very, very top quality female candidates for our board of directors. So now we have, 2 out of our 5 board members are women. Many of our consultants and senior advisors are also women. So we're still not doing great. Of 14 employees, we have 2 women. We need to lean in and work a little harder on that. But we're conscious of where we need to kind of build up our diversity and trying to build out the pipeline and get to the candidates where the candidates are, and not just having them come to us. So so that's, a lot of it is also about recruitment and outreach to make sure that you have a diverse kind of pipeline of candidates coming into your company.
Totally agreed. I'm glad you mentioned about the immigration part. I think the provincial government fast-tracked PNP program is really good, and I'm not sure that a lot of startups actually know about it and utilize it. So there's a tool there that can be definitely used to get some great talent. So I think we're coming pretty close to our time here. So I'm gonna just maybe put out one more question, and then we'll get some questions from the audience. So startup founders, great job, huge amount of fun, work about 2 hours a week, on vacation most of the time. What are some of the myths that you hear about startup founders all the time?
Yeah, I can just say on that, and this is more personal experience because I am the solo founder. Everybody used to say you need a co-founder. Like you just need a co-founder. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to grow. You're not going to hit that, the first 10K. Well, guess what? We did do that. And, so I think it's possible. Yes, I think co-founder could absolutely help. Sometimes I do feel that pain. But when people say to me, you need a COO, like, yeah, maybe I need an operations manager. I think just even looking at what is it that you need at what stage of your company. I would love to have a co-founder, a COO or, CTO, but I think that they need to bring that skill set. Even on the culture side, are your values aligned? If you haven't worked with that person before, have you so I think that there's just a lot of myths that you need XYZ. Everybody's journeys are different, everybody's products and missions are different, and the values need to be aligned and your mission needs to be aligned. So I would just say, like, do not rush into these key decisions, because I know a lot of startups who fail just because of co-founder issues. So I just wanted to share that. That's a myth. You can be successful, and I know a lot of companies like that.
I think on the topic of myth busting, what you need, similar to Humaira, we're also bootstrapped, and I think that's also another myth. You have to raise a ton of money, you have to have investors, and I see lots of people with bright ideas, and then their step one is, okay, go raise money. It's well, that should be like step 10 maybe. And I think part of that is just what you read. It tends to formulate how you think about the world, and we like as a culture to celebrate big numbers, and when people raise billions of dollars, we like to put them on headlines. But one of the things that I've noticed and learned over time is that a lot of these big financing rounds, this whole VC ecosystem, really originated from the Valley, and many of those businesses were primarily B2C. And you think about Instagram or WhatsApp, and how do we build this product that's going to reach some sort of critical mass with 1 billion users without generating a single dollar in revenue? And if that's the business model, of course you're going to need to raise money for years on end. But not every business falls into that criteria. If you're in B2B, for example, if you have customers that you sell to and they have money and they're willing to pay you, that is revenue. And so what I would like to challenge people to think about is financing and revenue are basically similarly in a sense that you need money to operate, but they're not so different. You can get money in so many different ways. In Canada, there's so many different government grants that are available. There are hiring grants that are available. That's a very strong source of funding before needing to look into investments. Customer revenue is one of the healthiest ways of income, because not only does it help you pay the bills, but it also validates your product and your business. And by putting a price tag on your item, you can then suss out who actually loves your product, who's willing to pay for it. So that's the myth I want to bring forth: is don't feel like you have to have funding and financing to be able to start a business.
Great advice. Customer revenue is the best revenue. 30 seconds to Lynda and Eric.
Yeah, just building on that, we're so culturally trained to look at ROI in terms of profitability, and certainly that's a concern as a founder. But I made a very definitive decision to look at a return to profit, people, and planet, and to build a business that would have ROI on all three of those. Because I think if you're not coming from your startup from a place of love and putting love into action and solving a problem that you want to spend the next 10 years on, if you're just in it because you think it's going to be successfully profitable and you're in it for the money, you won't be successful. So it is love in action, and you need to figure out, what does ROI look like for you, and how do they fit into those values? And for me, it has to be good for people, it has to be good for the planet, and it has to be profitable.
Great advice.
I guess the one myth buster I bring up is you don't need to be an engineer to co-found a software company. So I'm actually not an engineer, and I think that as software development gets easier to do and more ubiquitous, I think that we're going to increasingly see founders of technology companies that are not necessarily coming from engineering backgrounds, but might be coming from a life experience that has driven to solve a problem. And true. That's when you probably need a co-founder, right? If you're not engineering, you're running a software company, you're probably going to need somebody to be running your code for you. But so that's one thing that I would say is that and you just look at this panel, the diversity of how we became startup co-founders. It's no longer just, two dudes in a garage in Silicon Valley. There's many pathways to become a co-founder.
Thank you so much, all of you. I'm going to pass it back to Vivian for some questions from the audience, and then we'll close off in 10 or 15 minutes. Vivian.
So we've got a couple. One of them will be, we are now just over a year into this pandemic world. And, as startup founders leading awesome teams, what are some lessons that you can share with other startup founders, whether it's how do you manage and work with a remote team, or boosting morale, or checking in, for mental health? Anything you guys can all share? Whoever wants to start first.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. I think digital communications is a skill, and it's important to acknowledge that. And we learned that early on in the pandemic is we can't expect ourselves to be as efficient as we were, because we now suddenly all lack this new skill that we need. And so a lot of time, especially in the early pandemic, were spent sharing resources. What are best Zoom practices? What is Zoom fatigue? How do we manage it? Is it okay to have 40 people in a single Zoom together? Because you would never have a meeting with 40 people together. And we learned things along the way, such as the importance of just background chatter. You might not be in a meeting, but if people are talking about the product and your customers near you, that then guides what you do. But when you're in a complete isolated environment, you suddenly lose all of that context. So a lot of those learnings we continue to discover and share resources, and what are other companies figuring out. So I think just making a point to study it as a deliberate skill to build is a really important thing to acknowledge. It isn't something that comes naturally to everyone. On the matter of checking in and morale and wellness, we on our people operations team have kind of developed into almost an entertainment center. We're finding compelling guest speakers that we never otherwise would have been able to. And one of the examples was we had at one of our all hands, we had a goat appear. And it was a nice farm that's what they offer, is it's goat appearances in your Zoom calls. And so how do you bring delight into people's days? How do you introduce forms of remote interactions that were actually not possible? Like I guess I could bring a goat into the actual office, but like chances are I wouldn't do that. How do we create unique experiences? And I remember another special guest we had was a Zoom magician, and the special type of magic tricks he does only works on Zoom. It just doesn't work anywhere else. And so delighting people and the team, and that's one of the ways that we've brought some smiles to the pandemic work life.
I'm expecting some really unique sessions with you next year, Mike. I'm expecting goats. I'm expecting
goats and magic
magicians.
shows.
Yeah,
I can't take credit.
Sessions are going to be great.
We've got an amazing HR team that drives most of those decisions.
Yeah, I think for us, we had been working in this way already, and so I sort of shared. I was on a lot of CEO roundtables, kind of sharing early on in the pandemic how we did work this way virtually, because we've been doing it for several years. So that wasn't a shift, but a big shift was, in addition to what Michael said in terms of as a CEO, just being much more dialed in and concerned about people's mental well-being and what was going on for them in the background, and making sure they had the supports in place. A big learning for us was, I used to be on a plane every single week, and you don't have to go to your customers, and the environmental impact of that is something that weighed on me tremendously. So there's other ways of building relationships in this new world and with your customers that doesn't need you to be on a plane every week. And I think that's a really positive thing for how the world has changed, that we've learned how to develop relationships and intimacy and connection in a way that is much more scalable and better for the earth as well.
just wanted a quick point about inclusivity while you're doing all these things, just to be mindful that not everybody will like the idea of, say, like I don't know, like a coffee hour, wine hour, or whatever that may be. You know, people have different preferences and lifestyles. So one of the things that we do is, like, every week we have a one-on-one. I mean, I can at this point, as we're still 7 people, and you know, we're always thinking of how do we scale that. But at the same time, I think it's really important to having those one-on-ones and seeing where is it that we can be doing better? Like, where are some of the things that you feel uncomfortable? And you can sometimes even tell, like, people who are not speaking up much, like making sure that you're giving them the opportunity. So yeah, that's just one of the things that I'm constantly mindful of, like, are we being inclusive enough? So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I'd say just being overt about, you know, especially mental illness things during like all hands meetings, and just openly talking about it creates a safe space, especially if you're the leader and you can talk about it. We had an interesting case because we're globally distributed. So as the pandemic rolled out, we have people in Bangkok, in Manila, in Lima, Peru, in Ecuador. You know, Ecuador and Peru, Ecuador particularly hard hit. You know, Peru is virtually under martial law for 100 days. You couldn't leave your home. So, you know, it was very, very stressful for some of our employees. And just being, you know, as we heard, just being very mindful of that, being open to talk about the stresses of domestic life. And, you know, there's a baby crying in the background. Don't worry about it. That's the last thing that you need to worry about, you know, so.
I think we have time for one more question. This one is to all the panelists, but I'm going to include Raghwa in on this one. After the first years and knowing what you know now, what is a good resource for a fresh startup that's pre-revenue to tap into to create income, to get traction, except sales?
I just want to say one thing on that. And it sounds, I know I'd probably be like a broken record, but sell before you build. Even if that means you put up a landing page, you know, share it with the world, measure the traffic if that's the only thing you can do. And people who come through your landing page, you know, ask them questions. The chances are people want to help. People do want to help. You know, make it a goal to reach out to at least 100 people who could be potential buyers, or 100 companies who could be potential clients. But even this is one of the biggest mistakes that we made is, again, when we started Locelle, it was like, okay, we're going to have this social network. We're going to connect all these like-minded women, and that's probably how we're going to solve this problem. And then the first thing I would hear is like, you need a CTO. You need a CTO to build. I hadn't even left the building to do my interviews, and I already needed a CTO. Bad decision. And obviously we're now doing, you know, gone into mentor matching, but I think even with that, we started super manual. Like, I was like, after 2 years of doing this as a tech startup, I'm going to be doing manual stuff, but we did it. And then it was so valuable because we learned, where is it that we needed to build a product? Like, you know, what are some of the features that we actually needed? So please do not get into feature creep. Build a landing page. It's super simple. You can do it in 10 minutes. You can find people who can do it in 10 minutes, but really try to sell, even if it's a selling the vision, before you get into, I'm going to build something, because like majority, I can even bet on it, that your product's going to look completely different.
One of the big things of big failures is looking for perfection. It needs to be incremental as opposed to waiting until everything's perfect before I go out, number one. Second thing is, go out of your building. You need to sell your concept first. So again, incremental building the product, incremental in building the business, but also incremental in the validation process. Get out of the building, sell your concept. You know, talk to 100 people, and if 50 of them don't like it, maybe you're not on the right thing. Number one, if the concept sells, then like Humaira says, you need to see where the rubber hits the road. You need to be able to sell that. Like, you know, this is what I have. Will you actually put your money? And if that's the case, go forward. If not, you want to regroup and rethink. Those would be my advice. So.
Also, I hear Raghwa hands out 6-figure checks. That might be a good starting point.
Happy to help out anyway.
I heard that too.
I have photo proof.
We all do, Mike.
There is no better time in the world to be an entrepreneur, and I'm hugely biased, but there is no better country and there's no better province in which to be an entrepreneur. Like, we look at what's just happened in the past week, you know, through your work and the teams, Vivian, you know, Innovate BC, BC Tech, ACE Tech, New Ventures BC, all of the wonderful accelerators, the digital supercluster, which is an amazing thing, right, you know, right across Canada, but here in BC. There, IRAP was such a wonderful program. I could go on and on and on. Accelerate Okanagan, Biotech, you know, there is no lack of support. There is, and certainly many of these weren't in place, you know, when I was starting out, and certainly not for my first business. So there is no better time. What I would caution is, and to Raghwa's point exactly, and Humaira's too, is get out of the building, go sell it first, go talk to people. Do not confuse success in these programs or even winning competitions as signals of product market fit. They're incredible supports, and if you're strategic, you're going to get a lot of runway out of these, and it's going to you know, leapfrog you and fast track you in a way, you know, that you couldn't otherwise. But do the hard work. Look at those programs and those funds as investments and treat them just as you would, and try and be as efficient in getting as much runway as you can from those. So I'm so hopeful about the problems that entrepreneurs are solving around the world. And I mean, just look at, like, I've learned something from each of you today, you know, incredible entrepreneurs and leaders that are all making a huge difference in the world. So it's yours for the taking, but you have to do the hard work up front and forevermore. It's not just up front, it's a long time.